For 10 years, Stephen had lived in darkness. A cruel accident had taken his sight, robbing him of sunsets, faces, and every shade of color he once knew. Yet he had not surrendered. His little house had become a map carved into memory. Every corner, every step, every object had its place. His fingertips told him what his eyes could not. His ears became sharp, catching sounds most people ignored. But the most beautiful sound in his life came from a small glass bowl. Inside it lived Finn, a tiny goldfish who had become Stephen's heartbeat in the silence. Finn was more than a pet. He was company, laughter without words, a little spark of life shimmering in the dark. Stephen couldn't see the golden-orange scales glinting under the light, but he could feel the small pulses of Finn's movements through the glass. He could hear the gentle burble of water, the faint splash as Finn darted from side to side. Every morning was a ritual. Stephen would reach for the small food container, feeling for the edge of the lid with practiced precision. He would shake out just the right amount, listening for the delicate rustle of flakes before they sprinkled into the water. The soft plop told him Finn's breakfast was served. Then Stephen would sit quietly, tilting his head, listening to the tiny swish of fins. It was ordinary, almost invisible to the world outside, but to Stephen it was joy. But one Tuesday morning, joy shattered into terror. It happened so fast. Stephen reached for the kettle, and his elbow brushed too far. A sharp crack filled the room, followed by the awful shatter of glass. Water gushed across the counter and cascaded to the floor. Stephen froze, his chest tightening. Then came the silence. The silence where Finn's bubbling world had always been. His heart lurched. "Finn!" He dropped to his knees, hands flying across the slick tiles. Cold water soaked his sleeves as his palms slid desperately. His fingers found shards of glass, sharp, biting, but he didn't care. He searched, frantic, sweeping every inch of the wet floor. But Finn wasn't there. Only emptiness. Seconds turned heavy, dragging like hours. The old grandfather clock in the hallway ticked, each sound a hammer driving panic deeper. Finn couldn't survive long without water. His throat tightened as despair clawed at him. He had to find him. But how? He was blind. His friend was small, fragile, and slipping away. Then a thought pierced his panic. The drain. The kitchen floor sloped gently towards a drain in the corner. For a goldfish, that dark hole was death. Terror surged through Stephen. He shot to his feet, groping for the counter, then ripped the shirt from his back. Cold air hit his skin as he staggered towards the drain, bare feet sliding on the wet floor. Dropping down, he stuffed the shirt into the hole, jamming the fabric deep. The drain was sealed. At least Finn wouldn't vanish there. But Finn still needed water. Without it, he would die within minutes. His chest heaved as he turned towards the sink. His hands found the faucet and twisted it open. Water roared into the basin. With cupped hands, he scooped and flung it onto the floor. Again. His hands were clumsy buckets, spilling more than they carried. Desperation pushed him faster. He grabbed a dish cup, filled it, splashed it across the tiles, then repeated, over and over, until the kitchen became a shallow pool. His muscles screamed. His knees bruised against the floor. Once he slipped hard, his knee cracking painfully against tile. He gasped, but forced himself up again. Pain meant nothing. Finn needed him. Stephen's world had already been stripped of sight. He could not let it be stripped of life, too. Minutes stretched like hours. Water spread, shimmering thinly across the kitchen floor. Stephen stood drenched, chest heaving, sweat mixing with cold water on his skin. His arms burned with exhaustion, but he kept going until the floor became a shallow lake. Finally, there was nothing more to pour. He had done everything he could. Stephen lowered himself onto the wet floor, crossing his legs in the middle of the flooded kitchen. Cool water seeped into his trousers, clinging to his skin. He placed his palms flat on the submerged tiles, closing his eyes, though it made no difference. His whole body leaned into listening, not with ears, but with touch. The silence pressed in. Only the steady drip, drip of the faucet echoed in the room. His heart pounded. What if it was too late? What if Finn had already gone still? The thought cut like a knife. And then a tremor. A faint flutter brushed against his ring finger. Stephen froze. His breath caught, chest aching with held air. Was it real? A trick of his imagination? Then it came again, a tiny bump, stronger this time, a living touch against his palm. "Finn," Stephen whispered, his voice breaking. A sob burst from him. Relief and joy flooded out as tears streaked down his cheeks. Finn was alive. The little fish swam in circles around his hand, brushing fins against his skin, nudging his palm as if to say, "I'm here. You saved me." Stephen didn't move. He just sat there, letting Finn come to him, letting that fragile, wordless bond speak louder than anything else. In that flooded kitchen, Stephen felt a connection deeper than he had ever known. A friendship carved from silence and built on love. He had turned disaster into a sanctuary, a world for Finn born out of desperation, but powered by devotion. And in return, Finn had chosen life. The darkness around Stephen didn't feel so heavy anymore. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of breath, heartbeat, and the flutter of Finn's. He sat there for a long time, letting Finn swirl around him until his tears finally slowed. The pain in his knee throbbed, his arms ached, his skin shivered under wet clothes. But none of it mattered, because in his hands, against his palms, was proof that even in the deepest dark, love could build light. And Stephen knew something with absolute certainty. You don't need eyes to see life's miracles. Sometimes you just need to feel.